My husband whispered to his mother that I'd never be as smart as his ex, but the baby monitor carried his words straight to me. I was upstairs putting our 6-month-old daughter down for her nap when I heard his voice crackling through the monitor, clear as day. His mother had come over for Sunday dinner and they were cleaning up in the kitchen below. I'd excused myself to handle bedtime, grateful for a break from her passive-aggressive comments about my housekeeping and how Veronica used to keep such an immaculate home. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if things had worked out with Veronica, he said. She was getting her PhD in neuroscience when we broke up. Real intellectual conversations, you know? We could discuss complex theories, debate methodology, challenge each other's assumptions. She understood the nuances of academic discourse. My blood turned cold. I stood frozen in the nursery doorway, clutching the monitor like it might somehow take back those words. Our daughter stirred in her crib, and I held my breath, praying she wouldn't wake up and interrupt this devastating revelation. Don't get me wrong, he continued, his voice carrying that casual tone he used when discussing the weather. I love my wife. She's a good mother, sweet girl, keeps the house clean, makes decent meals, does the laundry without complaining. But she dropped out of college to work at that insurance office. Sometimes when I try to discuss complex topics, she just stares at me with those blank eyes. Doesn't get it. Nods along like she understands, but I can see the confusion. His mother's voice was softer, but the monitor picked up every syllable. Well, you made your choice, dear. You said you wanted someone who would support your career, not compete with it. Someone stable and nurturing. The baby's beautiful, though. I know. And she tries so hard to keep up. It's almost endearing how she pretends to understand when I talk about my research, like a dog trying to understand calculus. She'll nod and make encouraging sounds, ask basic questions that show she has no grasp of the fundamental concepts. But Veronica could actually challenge me intellectually. We'd stay up until 3 in the morning, debating research papers, dissecting methodology, arguing about theoretical frameworks. She's probably running her own lab by now, making groundbreaking discoveries while I'm explaining basic statistical concepts to someone who thinks correlation implies causation. I sank into the rocking chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of him encouraging me to focus on our family instead of returning to school. 3 years of dismissing my ideas as cute but simple. 3 years of explaining basic concepts to me like I was a particularly slow child who needed extra patience and simplified language. The conversation continued downstairs. He was telling his mother about the International Research Symposium where he'd be presenting his breakthrough findings next month, how this could establish him as a leading voice in his field, how department heads from major universities would be watching, how proud he was that his research might change everything, how this presentation could secure his tenure-track position. His mother asked about his work, and he launched into an explanation of his methodology, the same methodology I'd identified as fatally flawed 6 months ago. I listened to him describe statistical models that violated basic assumptions, control groups that were contaminated from the start, and data interpretations that ignored fundamental principles any first-year statistics student would catch. The irony was devastating. Here he was, mocking my intelligence while preparing to present research so fundamentally flawed it would destroy his career. And I was the only person who could save him from that humiliation. The worst part? He was right about some things. I had dropped out of college when Dad got his cancer diagnosis and Mom needed help managing medical bills and care coordination. I'd been studying mathematics with plans to continue into data science, but life had other plans. My academic dreams had been shelved for family obligations, financial necessities, and survival. I'd planned to go back, but then we met at a coffee shop near campus. He was this brilliant graduate student with intense eyes and passionate theories about changing the world through research. I was just a girl working 2 jobs to keep my family afloat, exhausted but determined to build something better for myself. When he paid attention to me, I felt special, important. Like maybe I was smarter than my circumstances suggested. He'd talk about his work with such enthusiasm, and I'd listen with genuine fascination. He said I had an intuitive grasp of complex concepts that impressed him. He made me feel like I belonged in his world of academia and intellectual pursuit. Those early conversations had been intoxicating. He'd explain his research, and I'd ask questions that made him light up with excitement. He'd tell me I had a natural analytical mind, that I understood concepts that confused his classmates. I'd felt like maybe my circumstances hadn't diminished my intellectual capacity after all. But somewhere along the way, that dynamic had shifted. My questions became annoyances. My insights became cute attempts at understanding. My genuine interest became patronizing tolerance of my limitations. What he didn't know was that I'd been secretly taking online courses for 2 years. Advanced mathematics, computer programming, statistical analysis, research methodology, data visualization, machine learning fundamentals. While he thought I was watching daytime television during my maternity leave, I was earning certifications from MIT and Stanford. While he explained his work to me like I was 5 years old, I was completing graduate-level coursework and maintaining a perfect GPA. The irony was exquisite. Every night after he fell asleep, I'd slip downstairs to my hidden workspace in the basement. While he dreamed of academic glory, I was building the very expertise he assumed I could never possess. While he talked down to me about basic concepts, I was mastering advanced techniques he'd never learned. What he really didn't know was that his precious research, the 18-month project that would make or break his academic career, was built on a foundation of statistical quicksand. I'd spotted the critical error in his methodology 6 months ago while reviewing his notes at his request. He'd asked me to proofread for typos, assuming I couldn't understand the content anyway. The problem was elegant in its simplicity, the kind of error that made me physically cringe when I realized how obvious it was. His statistical model assumed normal distribution in data that was clearly skewed. His control groups were contaminated by selection bias so obvious it practically screamed from the spreadsheets. His correlation analysis confused causation in ways that would make any competent researcher question his basic training. The entire project was like a house of cards built on a foundation of mathematical ignorance. But the errors went deeper than simple methodological mistakes. His literature review had missed key papers that directly contradicted his hypothesis. His sample size calculations were based on effect sizes that defied physical possibility. His data collection protocols introduced systematic bias that invalidated every conclusion he'd drawn. I'd tried to bring it up gently, suggesting maybe he should have a colleague review his statistical approach before proceeding. He'd patted my head like I was a golden retriever who'd learned a new trick. Thanks for trying to help, sweetheart. Maybe stick to what you know best. Leave the complex thinking to people who understand it. That condescending smile, that tone that suggested my concern was adorable but ultimately meaningless. That dismissal that made me feel small and stupid and grateful for his patience with my intellectual limitations. That night, I'd returned to my computer and spent hours documenting every flaw in his work. Not out of malice, but out of genuine concern for his career. I'd prepared a detailed analysis showing exactly where his methodology went wrong and how to fix it. I'd researched alternative approaches that could salvage months of work. I'd planned to present it to him carefully, diplomatically, in a way that would save his ego while protecting his future. But every time I tried, he'd interrupt with condescending explanations of concepts I understood better than he did. Every time I questioned his approach, he'd smile indulgently and tell me how sweet it was that I took interest in his work. Every time I suggested alternatives, he'd remind me that research methodology was complicated, and maybe I should focus on things more suited to my background. The frustration had been eating at me for months, watching him march confidently toward professional suicide while dismissing the one person who could save him. Sitting through dinner parties where he'd explain his groundbreaking research to colleagues who nodded politely while I spotted flaws they were too polite to mention. Listening to him plan his career around findings that wouldn't survive peer review. His department was presenting their findings at the International Research Symposium next month, the biggest conference in their field. Department heads from Harvard, MIT, Stanford would be in attendance. Science journalists would be covering the major announcements. His research was scheduled for a prime presentation slot right after the keynote address. Findings that would be publicly eviscerated by actual experts who'd spot the same errors I had within minutes of seeing his slides. His career would be over before it really began. The department would be humiliated. Years of work and funding would be revealed as meaningless. Grant money would be revoked. Collaborators would distance themselves. His name would become synonymous with incompetent research. I looked down at our sleeping daughter, her tiny face peaceful in the dim light filtering through the nursery curtain. She had his dark hair, but my stubborn chin. She deserved better than a father who thought intelligence was gendered, who dismissed half the population as intellectually inferior by default. She deserved better than a mother who accepted being treated as a decorative accessory to someone else's brilliant career. But more than that, she deserved to grow up in a world where women's minds were valued, where intelligence wasn't measured by gender, where being smart wasn't something to hide or apologize for. I made a decision that would change everything. By the time he realized what was happening, it would be too late. That night, after he fell asleep, I crept down to his home office. His computer password was our daughter's birthday. Predictable and sentimental, just like him. I copied all his research files to a secure drive, then spent until dawn documenting every statistical error, every methodological flaw, every assumption that violated basic principles of data science. The analysis took me 12 pages of detailed mathematical explanations, complete with corrected models and alternative approaches. I included citations from the very textbooks he'd recommended I was too simple to understand. I cross-referenced his errors with established statistical principles he'd apparently never learned properly. I provided step-by-step corrections that could salvage his research if implemented immediately. But I didn't stop there. I researched the conference attendees, identifying the most respected statisticians and methodologists who'd be in the audience for his presentation. I found their published papers criticizing exactly the kind of errors my husband had made. I prepared a comprehensive report that any competent researcher would immediately recognize as legitimate and devastating. I also researched Dr. Patterson, his department head. She had a reputation for methodological rigor and zero tolerance for sloppy research. Her own publications were models of statistical precision. She'd built her career on catching exactly the kind of errors that would destroy lesser researchers. The next morning, I called the university and asked to speak with Dr. Patterson directly. Dr. Patterson, I said when she answered. This is regarding the Henderson Research Project scheduled for presentation at the International Symposium. I think there might be some serious methodological issues you should know about before the conference. She was silent for a moment, probably trying to place who I was. I'm sorry. Who is this? I'm his wife. I have a background in statistical analysis, and I've been reviewing his work. There are fundamental errors that could damage the department's reputation if they're presented publicly. I spent the next 45 minutes walking her through the problems. She asked pointed questions that proved she understood the implications immediately. Her silence grew longer after each explanation, and I could practically hear her horror growing. These are serious allegations, she said finally. Where did you study statistics? What's your background in research methodology? Online certifications through MIT and Stanford extension programs. I've been working on my bachelor's degree in applied mathematics remotely while on maternity leave. I specialized in research methodology and data analysis. I can provide my transcripts and certifications if needed. Another long pause. Would you be available to come in this week? I need to see your documentation. And I'll need to verify your credentials. If what you're saying is accurate, we have a major problem. That afternoon, I drove to the university for the first time in years. The campus looked different. Newer buildings, updated landscaping, students who looked impossibly young. Dr. Patterson's office was in the mathematics building, a place I dreamed of working someday before life redirected my path. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her office was lined with statistics textbooks and research journals. Awards and certifications covered one wall. This was a woman who understood the value of intellectual rigor. I presented my analysis, walking her through each error with supporting documentation. She followed along, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions or request additional evidence. Her expression grew more troubled with each page. "This is extraordinary work," she said when I finished. "Your analysis is more thorough than most peer reviews I've seen. How long did this take you?" "About 6 hours to document everything properly. But I spotted the major errors months ago. Why didn't you bring this to our attention sooner?" I tried to discuss it with my husband. He told me research methodology was too complex for me to understand and suggested I focus on things more suited to my background. Dr. Patterson leaned back in her chair, processing this information. "What else have you found in his previous work?" I opened another folder. I'd prepared for this question. 3 published papers with similar methodological flaws. 2 grant applications based on faulty assumptions. A conference presentation from last year that violated basic statistical principles. She reviewed each document, her expression growing more serious. "This represents a pattern of incompetent research spanning several years. How has this not been caught before? I think people assumed his work was correct because he presents it confidently. And frankly, I don't think many people in the department have the statistical background to spot these specific errors. But you do. I've been studying this for years. It's become a passion of mine." She was quiet for several minutes, studying my documentation. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "Would you be interested in a position here? We desperately need someone with your analytical skills to review research before it goes public. Quality control analyst for academic publication. The salary would be substantial, and we'd cover tuition for whatever additional education you'd want to pursue." I felt my heart skip. This was what I dreamed of years ago, before circumstances forced me down a different path. I'd be very interested. When my husband came home that evening, I was feeding our daughter in her high chair. He kissed my forehead absently, the same casual affection he'd show a household pet. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, while loosening his tie. "Catch up on your shows? Did you remember to call the pediatrician about her checkup?" "Actually," I said, not looking up from spooning pureed carrots into our daughter's mouth. "I had several interesting conversations today, including one with Dr. Patterson." His face went white so fast I thought he might faint. "What? Why would she call you? Did something happen to the research files? Is there a problem with the conference?" "She didn't call me. I called her. About your research project." He stared at me like I'd announced I was secretly an alien. "You called my department head? What could you possibly need to discuss with her? Did you need something for insurance paperwork? The statistical errors in your methodology? The contaminated control groups you ignored? The correlation analysis that violates basic assumptions? The sample bias that invalidates your entire conclusion? The literature review that missed contradictory findings? The effect size calculations that defy physical possibility?" His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on dry land. "What are you talking about? You don't understand research methodology. You work in insurance processing. You file claims and answer phones and make photocopies." I stood up, still holding our daughter, who was happily smearing orange vegetables across her face. "I understand methodology better than you do, apparently." Dr. Patterson was very grateful I reached out before the conference. She said I prevented what could have been a career-ending public humiliation for you and a reputation-damaging scandal for the department. "That's impossible. You barely graduated high school. You dropped out of college. You've never taken a statistics course in your life. You don't even understand basic mathematical concepts. I worked insurance until maternity leave started. And I've been finishing my degree while you thought I was watching soap operas and eating bonbons. Bachelor's in Applied Mathematics. Graduating summa cum laude next month, with a focus on statistical analysis and research methodology." The color drained from his face completely. He gripped the kitchen counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Dr. Patterson offered me a position in the department, quality control analyst for research projects. Apparently, they desperately need someone who can actually spot methodological errors before they submit research for peer review. Someone who understands that correlation doesn't imply causation, unlike some people with advanced degrees who somehow miss that fundamental principle. He sank into a chair, his legs apparently unable to support him. "This is insane. You can't just call someone supervisor and destroy their career. This is my life's work. This project is everything I've been building toward. Years of research, months of data collection, weeks of analysis. Destroy their career by pointing out they're incompetent?" I asked, settling our daughter back into her high chair. "You're right. That would be terrible. Almost as terrible as spending 3 years treating your wife like she's intellectually disabled. I'm not incompetent. One project with some issues doesn't mean my entire body of work is worthless. Everyone makes mistakes. Peer review exists to catch these things. It's not one project. I've been reviewing your work for months. That paper you published last year about predictive modeling, built on flawed regression analysis that any competent statistician would have caught. The grant application you submitted last month, based on statistical assumptions that violate basic principles taught in undergraduate courses. The conference presentation you gave in Chicago? I could have driven a truck through the holes in your methodology." His hands were shaking now, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "But but you don't understand the pressures of academic research, the competition for funding, the pressure to publish, the complexity of balancing methodological rigor with practical constraints. I understand that none of those pressures excuse fundamental incompetence. I understand that if you can't do the math correctly, you shouldn't be doing research that affects people's lives. Why would you do this to me? We're married. We're supposed to support each other. I've given you everything: a beautiful home, financial security, a family. I've worked 60-hour weeks to provide for us. I tried to support you, multiple times. I tried to help you fix the errors before they became public. You patted my head and told me I was adorable for trying to understand big boy concepts. But I never meant it to sound condescending. I was trying to be encouraging. I thought you wanted to be included in my work, so I tried to explain things at a level you could understand. You thought I wanted to be patronized. There's a difference between inclusion and condescension. You didn't want a partner who could contribute to your work. You wanted an audience who would applaud your brilliance without questioning it. I walked to the kitchen counter and returned with a manila folder I'd prepared that morning. Your mother suggested yesterday that you made your choice when you married me. She's absolutely right. You chose to marry someone you thought was intellectually inferior, someone who would make you feel smart and important without threatening your ego. I dropped the folder on his lap. "What's this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Divorce papers. I filed this morning. Also included is documentation of every condescending comment you've made about my intelligence over the past 3 years. Every time you explained basic concepts like I was a child. Every time you dismissed my questions as cute but irrelevant. Every time you suggested I focus on things more suited to my limited abilities." He flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each entry. "You documented our private conversations? That's a violation of trust. These are things said in the privacy of our home. Trust?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean like trusting your husband not to mock your intelligence to his mother? Like trusting him to respect your contributions instead of dismissing them as cute attempts at understanding? Like trusting him not to compare you unfavorably to his ex-girlfriend within earshot of a baby monitor? But where will you go?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "You can't support yourself and the baby on an insurance salary. You need me. You need my health insurance, my income, my stability. Dr. Patterson's offer comes with a substantial salary increase, more than double what you're making as a graduate research assistant, actually, plus full benefits, retirement contributions, and the department is covering tuition for my master's degree program." Master's degree? In what? You can't just jump into graduate school. You'd need prerequisites, recommendations, standardized test scores. Biostatistics with a focus on research methodology. I've already completed most of the prerequisites through my online coursework. My undergraduate GPA and Dr. Patterson's recommendation were sufficient for admission. Apparently, there's a significant need for people who can identify the kind of fundamental errors you've been making throughout your academic career. He stared at me like I was a complete stranger. "When did you have time for all this? When did you become this person? This isn't the woman I married." "This person? You mean intelligent, competent, capable of independent thought?" "I've always been this person. You just never bothered to notice because it didn't fit your narrative of having rescued a simple girl from a life of mediocrity. While you thought I was too stupid to understand your bedtime reading, I was actually doing homework for advanced mathematics courses. While you explained basic research concepts to me like I was a child, I was earning certifications in statistical analysis. While you bragged to your colleagues about your brilliant research, I was documenting exactly why it was wrong. This is insane. You're destroying our family because you overheard one conversation, one moment of private venting to my mother. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're frustrated. I'm saving our daughter from growing up in a family where her mother is treated as intellectually inferior. I'm showing her that women don't have to accept being underestimated, dismissed, or patronized by the men in their lives." The baby started fussing, reaching for the spoon I'd abandoned. I resumed feeding her, my movements calm and deliberate while my husband's world crumbled around him. "You know what the really funny part is?" I continued, spooning pureed sweet potatoes into our daughter's eager mouth. "You were so proud of yourself for marrying someone smart enough to appreciate your work, but not smart enough to compete with it. You thought you'd found the perfect balance. An intelligent audience without the threat of intellectual challenge. I always supported your goals. I encouraged you to focus on our family because I thought that's what you wanted. I thought you were happy being a mother and wife. You supported the goals you decided were appropriate for me. When I mentioned wanting to finish my degree, you suggested I focus on our family instead. When I brought up career aspirations, you reminded me how fulfilling motherhood could be. When I asked about your research, you gave me simplified explanations designed for someone you assumed couldn't handle complexity, because I thought that's what you wanted me to want. I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was protecting you from the stress and competition of academic life. You thought that's what you wanted me to want. There's a difference between supporting someone's authentic dreams and molding them into what makes you comfortable. His phone rang, and Dr. Patterson's name appeared on the screen. We both stared at it. "Answer it," I said calmly. "She's probably calling to discuss the emergency review of your research. The department is scrambling to withdraw your presentation from the conference before it becomes a public embarrassment." He declined the call, his hands shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. 3 years, I said quietly, wiping our daughter's face with a clean cloth. 3 years of you making me feel stupid for asking questions about statistical significance, making me feel like I should be grateful for your patience when I didn't immediately understand concepts you'd studied for years. 3 years of treating me like a beloved pet who occasionally performed amusing tricks. I never meant to make you feel stupid. I thought I was being helpful. I thought you needed my guidance. I thought I was sharing my knowledge with someone I loved. You never thought about how I felt at all. That was the problem. You assumed that because I dropped out of college and worked in insurance, I was intellectually beneath you. You never considered that circumstances aren't the same as capability. Our daughter banged her spoon against her tray, demanding attention. I smiled at her, this perfect little person who would grow up knowing her mother was brilliant, capable, and worthy of respect. The next morning, I started my new position at the university. Dr. Patterson introduced me to the research team as their new quality control analyst and methodological consultant. She has an exceptional eye for statistical errors and methodological flaws, Dr. Patterson announced to the assembled researchers. Her analysis of the Henderson Project prevented what could have been a career-ending public humiliation. Her work is going to revolutionize how we approach quality control in academic research. The team consisted of 5 other researchers, 3 men and 2 women, all with advanced degrees and years of experience. They looked skeptical until Dr. Patterson showed them samples of my work. Then their expressions shifted to something resembling respect. That afternoon, I received an email from Veronica, my husband's ex-girlfriend. Somehow word had traveled through academic circles about his research being pulled from the conference. I heard you were the one who caught the methodological errors, she wrote. Congratulations on saving him from professional suicide. I always wondered how his work got published with such obvious statistical flaws. His dissertation committee must have been asleep during his defense. Guess he finally found someone actually smart enough to check his math. Attached to her email was a link to her latest research, groundbreaking work in neuroscience that had been featured in 3 major journals and cited by researchers worldwide. Her lab was developing treatments for traumatic brain injury that were revolutionizing patient care. By the way, her email continued, he used to complain that I was too focused on my career to be properly supportive. He said he needed a partner who would prioritize his success over her own ambitions. Funny how men only appreciate intelligence when it serves their needs, rather than challenging their assumptions. Best of luck with your new position. The field needs more people willing to prioritize accuracy over ego. I spent my first week reviewing ongoing research projects, identifying potential problems before they became public embarrassments. My background in insurance had actually prepared me well for this work, finding flaws in complex documents, identifying patterns of error, protecting organizations from costly mistakes. The work was intellectually stimulating in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Each project presented new challenges, different methodological approaches, unique statistical problems to solve. I was using parts of my brain that had been dormant for years. Dr. Faiz Patterson checked in with me regularly, reviewing my progress and providing guidance on departmental politics. She'd been impressed not just with my analytical skills, but with my ability to communicate complex problems in accessible language. You have a gift for explaining statistical concepts without jargon, she told me. That's rarer than you might think in academia. Most brilliant researchers can't communicate with anyone outside their narrow specialty. 3 months into my new position, my ex-husband called and asked to meet for coffee. We hadn't spoken since our last counseling session, communicating only through text messages about our daughter's schedule. He looked older when I saw him, tired in a way that went beyond simple fatigue. His research had been quietly withdrawn from the conference, and rumors about methodological problems had damaged his reputation within the department. I've been thinking about what you said, he began without preamble, about treating you like you were intellectually inferior. And you were right. I didn't just underestimate you. I actively discouraged you from demonstrating your intelligence because it made me feel insecure about my own abilities. I needed you to be less than me so I could feel like more than I was. I sipped my coffee and waited for him to continue. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I needed to feel superior to the person I supposedly loved most. Why I was so threatened by your intelligence that I had to diminish it. What have you learned? That I was raised to believe my worth was tied to being the smartest person in the room. My father was like that. Always had to be the expert. Always had to have the last word. I internalized that dynamic without realizing it. I nodded. That made sense, given what I knew about his family. I've also been thinking about our daughter, about what kind of father I want to be to her, what kind of example I want to set about how men should treat intelligent women. She's brilliant, I said, already showing signs of advanced mathematical reasoning. She's going to be formidable. I know, and I want her to know that her intelligence is something to be celebrated, not hidden. I want her to expect to be treated as an intellectual equal by any man in her life. That's a good start. Is there any chance we could try counseling again? Not to get back together necessarily, but to learn how to co-parent more effectively? I want to support her intellectual development, but I'm not sure I know how. I considered this. Our counseling sessions had been productive before, helping us develop better communication patterns and mutual respect. I'm willing to try family counseling focused on co-parenting, but we need to be clear about boundaries. This isn't about reconciliation. It's about creating the best possible environment for our daughter. He nodded eagerly. I understand. I just want to be a better father, a better person. 6 months later, I graduated with my bachelor's degree, summa cum laude with departmental honors. My ex-husband attended the ceremony, sitting in the back row with our daughter on his lap. When they called my name for academic recognition, I saw him wipe his eyes. After the ceremony, he approached me in the parking lot where I was taking photos with Dr. Patterson and my research team. I'm proud of you, he said quietly, our daughter reaching for my graduation cap with its bright tassel. Thank you. I know I have no right to ask this, but I want you to know that watching your success has been humbling, inspiring too. You didn't let my limitations define your potential. Our daughter was babbling excitedly, trying to grab everything within reach. She'd inherited both our curiosity and stubborn determination. I've been working on my own issues, he continued, learning about unconscious bias, about how internalized misogyny affects even people who think they're progressive. It's been eye-opening. That's good. Growth is always positive. I want our daughter to see her father treating her mother with respect. Real respect, not performative courtesy. She will. We're both committed to that. 1 year later, I completed my master's degree in biostatistics. Dr. Patterson promoted me to senior methodological consultant, making me the youngest person to hold that position in the department's history. My research on detecting statistical fraud in academic publications was being implemented by universities across the country. The work had evolved beyond simple error detection. I was developing algorithms that could identify suspicious patterns in research data, helping catch fabricated results before they reached publication. My methods were being adopted by major journals as part of their peer review process. My ex-husband and I had developed a respectful co-parenting relationship through months of intensive counseling. He'd learned to check his tendency toward condescension, and I'd learned to communicate my needs more directly instead of simply accepting dismissive behavior. During one of our final joint therapy sessions, the counselor asked him what he'd learned from our separation. I learned that I didn't want a partner, he said slowly. I wanted an audience. Someone to admire my intelligence without challenging it. Someone who would make me feel superior without requiring me to actually be superior. And what do you want now? Now I realize how much richer our relationship could have been if I'd treated her as an intellectual equal from the beginning. How much I could have learned from her perspective. How much stronger we could have been as a team instead of as performer and audience. The therapist turned to me. What about you? What did you learn? I learned that I don't need anyone's permission to be intelligent. I don't need to make myself smaller to make someone else feel bigger. And I don't need to accept being underestimated just because it makes other people more comfortable. 2 years after starting my position at the university, I published my first major research paper as lead author. It was featured on the cover of the Journal of Statistical Methodology. The fraud detection algorithm I developed was being used by research institutions worldwide. The paper had been cited over 200 times in just 3 months. My ex-husband called to congratulate me the day it was published. I read your paper, he said. It's brilliant. Groundbreaking. You're going to change how academic research is conducted. I'm sorry it took me so long to recognize how brilliant you've always been. Thank you. But I didn't do this research for your recognition or approval. I know. That's what makes it even more impressive. You did it because you're passionate about protecting the integrity of academic research. Because you care about truth more than ego. The recognition was gratifying, but what mattered most was the impact. My work was helping catch fraudulent research before it could mislead other scientists or harm public policy. It was preventing the kind of methodological errors that could waste millions in research funding. Dr. Patterson had recommended me for a prestigious fellowship that would fund my doctoral studies while allowing me to continue my research. The opportunity would establish me as a leading expert in research methodology, opening doors to positions at top universities. Our daughter was 3 now. She loved mathematics and puzzles, building complex structures with blocks and explaining the engineering principles behind them. When she played house, she was always the scientist making important discoveries. She gets her intelligence from both of us, my ex-husband said during our last conversation, but she's getting something else from you that she never would have gotten if we'd stayed together under the old dynamic. What's that? The absolute certainty that being smart isn't something to hide or apologize for. It's something to celebrate and share and use to make the world better. During our daughter's 3rd birthday party, I watched her explain to her little friends how the pulley system on her new swing set worked. She used precise vocabulary and demonstrated cause and effect relationships with the confidence of a natural teacher. One of the other mothers approached me afterward. She's remarkable, the woman said. So articulate and confident. You must be very proud. I am. She's growing up knowing that her ideas matter, that her questions are important, that her intelligence is valued. That's wonderful. I worry sometimes about raising confident daughters in a world that can be discouraging to smart women. I looked at our daughter, now building an elaborate fort with mathematical precision, directing her friends with gentle authority. The world is changing, I said. She'll have opportunities we never did. And more importantly, she'll expect to be treated as an intellectual equal. She won't accept anything less. Yesterday, our daughter told me she wants to be a research scientist when she grows up. Like Mommy, she said proudly, pointing to the framed copy of my journal article hanging in our living room. You can be anything you want to be, I told her, and you never have to make yourself smaller for anyone. Your intelligence is a gift to be shared, not hidden. She nodded seriously, then returned to her mathematics workbook, solving problems designed for children twice her age. That evening, as I was putting her to bed, she asked me a question that made my heart soar. Mommy, she said softly in the darkness of her room, why did Daddy used to talk to you like you were stupid? The question hit me like a physical blow. I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. He didn't understand how smart I was. Sometimes adults make mistakes about other people's abilities. But you're the smartest person I know, she said matter-of-factly. You help all those important people at the university fix their work. Thank you, sweetheart. The important thing is that now everyone knows how capable I am. And you'll grow up knowing that your intelligence matters just as much as anyone else's. Will I have to prove I'm smart like you did? I hope not. But if you ever have to, you'll be ready. You'll never doubt yourself the way I did. She nodded sleepily and closed her eyes. I sat there in the dark for a few more minutes, thinking about how different her childhood would be from mine. She'd never accept being talked down to. She'd never question her own intelligence because someone else was intimidated by it. 3 months later, Dr. Patterson called me into her office with news that would change everything again. I've been contacted by the National Science Foundation, she said, closing the door behind me. They want to offer you a position heading up their new research integrity initiative. It would mean moving to Washington, significant resources, the ability to implement your fraud detection methods across all federally funded research. I sat down heavily, trying to process this opportunity. It's a 5-year appointment with the possibility of permanent placement. The salary would be substantial, and they'd provide relocation assistance. You'd be working directly with policymakers to establish new standards for research methodology. What about my doctoral studies? They'd arrange for you to complete your PhD through a partnership program with George Washington University. You'd essentially be doing your dissertation research as part of your job responsibilities. I thought about our daughter, about uprooting her from the stability we'd built, but I also thought about the impact I could have on a national scale, preventing the kind of fraudulent research that wasted billions in funding and misled public policy. Can I have time to think about it? Of course. But I should mention that they specifically requested you because of your unique background. They said most academic researchers are too embedded in the system to effectively challenge established practices. Your outsider perspective is exactly what they need. That evening, I discussed the opportunity with my ex-husband during one of our regular co-parenting conversations. It's an incredible opportunity, he said immediately. You'd be crazy not to take it, but it would mean moving our daughter across the country, disrupting your relationship with her. He was quiet for a long moment. She needs to see her mother achieving at the highest levels. That's more important than geography. We can make visitation work. You've really changed, I said, surprised by his immediate support. I've learned that her success is more important than my convenience, and your success is part of her success. She needs to see what's possible for brilliant women. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. The day I told our daughter about the move, she surprised me with her reaction. Will I get to see where mommy's important work happens? She asked excitedly. Yes, and there are excellent schools there with special programs for children who love mathematics. Can I visit Daddy during summer vacation? Of course. He'll always be your father, no matter where we live. She seemed satisfied with this arrangement, already planning what she'd pack for our big adventure. The night before we left for Washington, my ex-husband came over to say goodbye. He brought a gift for our daughter, a telescope for exploring the night sky. I want you to keep looking up, he told her. Keep asking questions about how everything works. And remember that your mother is the smartest person I've ever known. After our daughter went to bed, he and I sat on the porch talking about the future. I need you to know something, he said quietly. These past few years, watching you build your career, seeing you succeed, it's been the most attractive thing I've ever witnessed. Not because I want you back, but because I finally understand who you really are. I'm the same person I always was. You just stopped seeing me clearly for a while. No, you've grown. You've become more yourself. More confident, more assertive, more willing to claim your space in the world. Maybe that's what happens when someone stops making you feel small. He nodded, looking out at the street where we'd once walked as a young couple planning our future together. I hope our daughter never has to fight for recognition the way you did. I hope she grows up expecting respect instead of having to demand it. She will. That's one thing I can guarantee. The move to Washington was seamless. Our daughter adapted quickly to her new school, making friends and impressing teachers with her advanced mathematical abilities. My work at the National Science Foundation was everything I'd hoped: challenging, impactful, and intellectually stimulating. Within 6 months, I'd implemented fraud detection protocols that caught 12 cases of fabricated research before publication. The methods I developed were being adopted by funding agencies worldwide. My work was protecting the integrity of scientific research on a global scale. But the most satisfying moment came during my first congressional testimony about research fraud. I was presenting findings to a committee of senators, explaining how statistical manipulation had wasted hundreds of millions in taxpayer funding. One senator, clearly skeptical of my credentials, interrupted my presentation. Dr. Henderson, he said with obvious condescension, these are very serious allegations. What qualifies someone with your background to make such sweeping claims about established researchers? I looked directly at him, remembering every time I'd been dismissed, every condescending comment, every assumption about my capabilities. Senator, I have a master's degree in biostatistics from a top-tier university, 5 years of experience in research methodology, and a track record of identifying fraud that other experts missed. My methods have been peer-reviewed and published in leading journals. The question isn't what qualifies me to identify these problems. It's what qualified the researchers to ignore basic statistical principles in the first place. The room fell silent. Then another senator leaned forward. Could you walk us through one of these cases? I'd like to understand exactly how these errors occur. I spent the next hour explaining complex statistical concepts in accessible language, showing exactly how fraudulent researchers manipulated data and why traditional peer review had failed to catch it. By the end, even the skeptical senator was nodding along. After the hearing, several committee members approached me with additional questions. The skeptical senator was the last to leave. Dr. Henderson, he said quietly, I apologize for my earlier tone. Your expertise is clearly extraordinary. Thank you for protecting taxpayer interests. That evening, I called my ex-husband to tell him about the hearing. You testified before Congress? He said, awe evident in his voice. About research fraud prevention. The testimony will be part of new legislation requiring stricter oversight of federally funded research. That's incredible. I'm watching the video online right now. You handled that senator perfectly. He tried to intimidate me the way you used to. It didn't work. There was a long pause. I deserve that, but I'm proud of you. Genuinely proud. You're changing how science is conducted at the highest levels. Our daughter wants to say goodnight. I said, handing her the phone. I listened to her excited chatter about her day, her friends, her latest mathematical discovery. She talked to her father with easy affection, secure in both relationships despite the distance. A year later, I completed my PhD with a dissertation on large-scale fraud detection in scientific research. The defense was attended by researchers from around the world, and my committee unanimously awarded me highest honors. My ex-husband flew to Washington for the ceremony, bringing flowers and a card from our daughter's class congratulating Dr. Mom on her achievement. "You've exceeded every expectation," he said afterward. "You've become exactly who you were meant to be. I was always this person. I just needed the opportunity to show it." Now, as I write this, our daughter is 5 years old and already reading at a high school level. She attends a specialized program for gifted children, where her mathematical abilities are nurtured rather than seen as unusual. She expects to be taken seriously by adults, to have her questions answered thoughtfully, to be treated as an intellectual equal regardless of her age. She has never doubted her own intelligence because no one in her life has given her reason to. Last week, she asked me what I do at work. "I help make sure scientists tell the truth," I explained. "I catch people who try to lie with numbers. Why would scientists lie? Sometimes people want to be famous or get money, so they pretend their research shows things it doesn't really show. But that's wrong. Science is supposed to help people." "Exactly. That's why my job is important." She nodded seriously, then returned to her own experiments with growing crystals in our kitchen. That night, I received an email from Veronica, my ex-husband's former girlfriend. She'd been following my career through professional publications. "I wanted you to know how impressed I am with your work," she wrote. "Your fraud detection methods are being implemented in my lab. It's gratifying to see someone prioritize scientific integrity over personal advancement." She included a link to her latest research breakthrough, a treatment for Alzheimer's that was showing promising results in clinical trials. "By the way," she continued, "I heard through mutual colleagues that your ex-husband has left academia entirely. Apparently, he's teaching high school mathematics now. Sometimes I think he would have been happier in a less competitive environment from the beginning." I found this information oddly fitting. Perhaps he'd found his proper level, working with students who actually needed his guidance rather than pretending to mentor colleagues who didn't. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never heard that conversation through the baby monitor. If I'd continued living in his shadow, accepting his assessment of my intellectual worth, teaching our daughter that women's minds matter less than men's egos. But then I look at her, confidently tackling problems that challenge children twice her age, asking sophisticated questions about how the world works, expecting to be taken seriously by every adult she encounters, and I know I made the right choice. She'll never wonder if she's smart enough. She'll never accept being treated as intellectually inferior. She'll never apologize for being brilliant. She'll never make herself smaller to accommodate someone else's insecurity, because she'll have watched her mother refuse to do any of those things. And perhaps most importantly, she'll understand that intelligence isn't about proving yourself to people who are determined to underestimate you. It's about using your capabilities to make meaningful contributions to the world. That understanding, I believe, is the greatest gift I could give her. The baby monitor that carried those devastating words to me 3 years ago sits in storage now, no longer needed. But sometimes I think about how that moment of accidental eavesdropping changed everything. It forced me to confront the reality of how I was being perceived and treated. It made me question why I'd accepted such diminishment of my abilities. It sparked a transformation that led not just to personal success, but to meaningful work that protects the integrity of scientific research worldwide. Our daughter will grow up in a world where women's intellectual contributions are increasingly valued and recognized. But if she ever encounters someone who tries to make her feel small, she'll have the tools to respond with confidence rather than self-doubt. She'll know that her worth isn't determined by others' recognition of it. She'll understand that brilliance doesn't require permission. And she'll remember that sometimes the most important conversations are the ones we're not supposed to hear.